Safety first, baby. I mean, honestly, how many of us who've been riding since the '90s will put our hands up and say, "Man, I wish I had a mountain bike lesson before I learned from trial and error." I just think I honestly believe that so many people learn to ride bikes as kids. Therefore, they think mountain biking is just riding a bike and that they'll figure it out just like they did as kids. They can jump off a curb, they can hit a wooden ramp in the parking lot. But I just don't think everybody understands that there are so many nuances and little skills that you can work on that add up to these bigger maneuvers that are going to keep you safer for longer when you understand what you're doing. And I'd say most of us who started without lessons, we thought we were just riding a bike. And that led to some pretty big crashes and some scary moments that I would have loved to do without had I known what I was doing.
So, like a lot of mountain bike lessons, if people look at it at face value, maybe people that don't really know much about the actual lesson, you look into it and you go, oh, they're going to teach me how to rip a corner. They're going to teach me how to hit a jump. But can you talk a little bit about like the depth of a mountain bike lesson and like what else it teaches you?
Well, I think that that's you nailed it, that people want to do the big things. They want to do the big maneuvers. And I don't think people have ever really understood that there's skills and then there's maneuvers. And a skill is a breakdown of what every single one of my body parts is doing in order to rail that corner, in order to hit that jump. I have to start by understanding foot placement on the pedals. How am I pressuring into my feet? How am I bending my knees? Am I squatting? Am I standing taller? What body position do I need to be in to get my bike to do the thing I want it to do? That comes from a lot of little skills that add up to either big moves or micro movements where I'm using my body together as a collective to understand that each body part plays a role in getting my bike to rail that corner and do that jump. And when I can learn those nuances, those little skills that maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal to understand where my feet need to be in a corner and what kind of pressure I need in my hands for traction between both wheels, I don't think people understand that there's a lot of little tiny things you can do that add up to getting you good at the big sexy maneuvers that everybody wants to learn. Jumps, drops, corners. Yeah, but do you know how to balance on your feet and move your body in a way that stays balanced over a moving bike? And if I ask people if they understand that, they usually don't.
Right. And it's definitely, it really is those like, how can you categorize those specific things? And I think at face value, a lot of people see that and they go, yeah, someone's going to teach me how to do that. And one of the things that you touched on a little bit earlier there was this like trial and error. And like mountain bike it's the world of big consequence. There's no such thing as like a chill mountain bike crash.
No, crashing on a bike sucks, and I really think sometimes you see these, people online just like, "Oh, the drunk girl at the party decided to jump on a bike and hit that ramp, and now she landed on her face," because I just don't think people truly realize the magnitude of crashing on a bike that has sharp parts on it. The dirt is hard, rocks are hard, trees don't move. Like, it's a whole different ballgame going from maybe if you're a skier or a snowboarder, taking some bad crashes in powder snow versus rolling through bushes and rocks and trees. It's not fun, and the tiniest little like, you talk about cornering. It's one of the most complex things to learn on a bike. I can teach jumping much quicker than I can teach cornering, right? And I think a lot of people don't understand that some of these moves that you do every single day, go around a corner on a bike, have so many variations of balance points and ways to move your bike and, variations in the trail. Is it loose? Is it tacky? Is it rocky? Is it a berm? Is it a flat corner? Like, there's so much to think about. And if you start your mountain biking journey with a deeper understanding of how to read terrain, how to know what your bike's going to do in certain types of terrain, and then the understanding of how to move the bike through it, along with how to move the body, it can get super complex. And if you're crashing in a corner and you don't know why, that takes time to dissect.
Yeah, and absolutely, and like, it's one thing to figure this all out on your own and try to dissect it on your own by potentially crashing into trees and falling on berms and whatever it is, and then it's a completely different thing to have somebody sort of like guiding you through this entire thing. And I mean, for me in mountain biking, for me, it's like a bit of an escape in ways. And it's a bit of a meditative thing as well. Like exercise for me has been quite meditative where you go and you do the thing and it's something you could focus on completely, utterly and completely. With mountain biking specifically, you have that whole level of uh, that level of risk, and then you also have this level of like, you have to be very, very focused in order to, execute all of these things. And so the mental side of it and like the depth in the mental side too, I think that, if somebody took a mountain bike course, with you or with anybody, and they were sort of shown that like, how do these mental skills apply in mountain biking? And then also, how do they apply kind of in a broader sense? Like these mental skills that you learn on the bike, like, can you speak a little bit about how that applies to your life?
I think that that is what I love so much about a sport like mountain biking. It does require a lot of focus. And so for those who suffer with any kind of mental health things, a lot of mental health revolves around the way that our brains think, right? We're all wired differently. I have dealt with depression a lot of my life where it feels like I cannot get away from the debilitating thoughts that are telling me I'm not going to make it through this life. Life is too hard for me. I'm not good enough. I'm not perfect enough. Like those thoughts, if you let those thoughts go long enough, you start to believe them. And that is what mental health issues are, is allowing those thoughts in your head to run wild to the point that you believe you're not enough or your life isn't worth living. And what mountain biking, specifically coaching and learning through a coach's eye, has done for me is it's given me something else to think about when I ride. Like, I'm not in a fear based state of mind anymore. When I first started, I'd see a rut in the trail and be like, oh, hell no, I'm running. And I'd jump off my bike and I'd run down because I didn't know what to do in a rut, but fast forward to my knowledge and understanding of what a bike does when it gets in a rut, I know now, don't try to get out of the rut, just stay in it, steer, maybe get off your brakes and wait till the rut ends. But when we fight it, when we try to do something that's not possible, or when our brains think in a fear state, that's not going to help us do what needs to be done to keep the wheels rolling. And that's a big motto we have at our camps is, what do I need to do to keep the wheels rolling forward? And that relates to life. If we have an issue in life or we go through some mental health struggles, our brain is telling us something and we can override that. So next time I'm on a trail with ruts, I know, A, don't look at the rut, only look where you want to go, but also be mindful of, I know what's going to happen if I get stuck in that rut. I'm going to have to ride it out. So I feel like knowledge is power. On the bike, I know what needs to happen to keep moving forward. I also know what I need to do if I get into trouble. And that all adds up from the little skills that I've practiced over time to get really good at understanding balance points on my bike. But in life, what that showed me, mountain biking proved to me that I can change my thoughts. I don't want to crash into that tree. So if I know that I'm in a situation where my front wheel slips and starts heading for a tree, I know to look away from that tree and steer, potentially get off my brakes. There's a series of skills involved in saving yourself from a crash that I know now because I've learned them. I think that totally translates into life when I start hearing my thoughts be negative or start tearing me down. I can actually stop and say, what thoughts do I need in my head right now to keep me moving forward? It all relates. And I think a lot of people who deal with mental health stuff, they truly believe I'm stuck in my head. I cannot get out. But a sport like mountain biking physically shows you and proves to you that doesn't have to be true. If you don't wanna crash on a bike, you're gonna change your fricking thoughts, and they're gonna be positive, and they're gonna keep your wheels rolling. So why can't I do that in life?
Do you think it's important for people to be scared consistently?
Yes, I totally do. I'm 51 years old, and one of the things we preach at our camps, especially to some of the older women, is do something that scares you every day, whether it's, public speaking or going to a dance club by yourself. I don't know, just things that are uncomfortable, I think is what makes us stronger people. Being uncomfortable and being a little scared, it taps into a side of us where we have to make conscious choices in how we're going to handle it. I think if we live in a complacent world where we're just happy being comfortable, that doesn't encourage growth. And I honestly, my dad's 81 years old and my mom recently died of Alzheimer's. And I actually say this at my welcome speeches now that it wasn't as hard to watch my mom die. It was time because she had Alzheimer's and that was pretty bad. It was seeing how much my mom did for my dad over the course of his life, that when she passed, suddenly he didn't know how to do anything, laundry, make meals, clean the house, and I really took a step back and was like, "You've never broken out of your comfort zone. You got into this pattern of life where someone else was taking care of the hard things that you didn't actually want to do, and now that you're forced to do them, they seem extra hard because you haven't had practice." And I think that that's what a sport like mountain biking can do for us, is it gives us practice in dealing with hard and scary situations and proves to us that we have the strength and the ability to persevere through a lot of things we put our minds to.
Yeah, and it's a nice analogy might be to look at, someone who's like mad in traffic. And that person's having like a bad day, they're like, this is the worst thing that's happened to them all day.
When you
Whereas if you're out there, scaring yourself, doing things that are genuinely pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, that though you might have less of a reaction when you're in those sort of more benign scenarios. Like, the laundry is not done and you don't have to be mad about it. You could just go and do it. That's why it's like having the comparison, being able to like the perspective from one to the other.
Well, and I think what's so beautiful about mountain biking is it forces you to understand the concept of choosing your attitude, right? There's plenty of times on a mountain bike ride, things are gonna go wrong, flat tire, a broken part, your brakes not working, your derailleur not shifting. These things happen on the trail, and I think putting yourselves in situations where we have to deal with something that went wrong does exactly what you said. It teaches us that we have to stay calm and that getting reactive and blowing up over something, that's not gonna help us get out of the woods any sooner. So we might as well be patient, learn how to change that flat. Maybe we have to walk our bikes out. We can be pissed off and cussing and making it worse, or we could just enjoy the fact that we're slowing down a little bit and we get to look at the trees and hear the birds. And to your point, I think a sport like mountain biking that is a little more on the I hate the word extreme, but it is a more challenging, aggressive sport. I believe that we all have energy inside of us that comes from stimulation throughout the day, stress from an email or, getting an answer that we didn't want or having a conflict with a spouse or a partner. If we have a place to go channel this energy and literally move it through our bodies with heavy breathing, fresh air, being in the moment during a challenging rock garden, I can only be focused on what needs to happen. That moves that energy through us. And now we don't have it all bottled up inside. And I do believe our generation is this new generation of actually feeling what's happening to us when we are stimulated by something. Oh, I'm mad. Where do I feel that in my body? Are my hands shaking? Is my heart beating fast? Do I feel it in my throat? A lot of people go straight to their heads, like, "I'm mad, I feel it in my head," but you don't. Usually, it's manifesting somewhere in your body. And I had a therapist once that was like, "When you feel sad, I want you to curl up in a ball on the floor and act out what sad looks like for 5 minutes and really move sadness through you." And I feel that is what the bike does for a lot of us. You're having a rough day or you go through something, you get on that bike and you become present in the moment. Things that seem to matter a lot before maybe don't matter as much because I have the gift of being able to go do this awesome thing that brings me joy.
Yeah, and there's the obvious benefits of exercise, and everyone gets out and moves, and they feel better and that sort of thing. But then something that I've been playing around with a little bit lately, the last few months, is meditation. But lines I started to draw, or the things I started to connect, was that meditation isn't far from a very focused skill, because really you're in the moment, and like really all we have is that moment, right? And when you get caught up in the day-to-day stuff of the emails and the you know fight that you had with your spouse, or like this and that, and all the stuff that's going on, you realize how chaotic everything is, and you're just trying to process all of that. And so letting it move through you, letting yourself be focused on a specific thing that matters in that moment, really helps.
Yeah, I believe in the power of the bicycle.
2 wheels. But yeah, so in the mountain bike world, like especially online, there's a lot of these like generalized cues for skills coaching. So they might be like elbows out, or like heels down, those sorts of things. But I wanted to ask you a question more along the lines of like the emotions that come with mountain biking. So are there any more generalized emotional skills that you have in mountain
Yeah, I do think it takes emotional maturity to stay focused in the moment, especially when you feel fear. And I think actually what's super cool about mountain biking is fear is obvious. When I feel scared of something on my bike because I don't want to go over the bars, I do ask women this, like when they look down a line and say, "Oh no, I can't do that." I actually want them to sit there for a second and tell me exactly what are you afraid of? Like, give me details, like breaking your arm, going off to the side, flipping over the bars. Okay, okay, now I'm hearing some like actual things you're afraid of happening. Now let's back it up. What are the skills that you need so none of that happens? Probably need to be off my brakes, probably need to be looking ahead, need to stay light on the front wheel and absorb the bumps. Like, if you could actually break down what you're truly afraid of and then think through what do I need to do so that doesn't happen, right? I think that there comes this understanding of people need to know what happens when you crash. That's the first thing I want to do is, of course, I want to make sure someone's okay, but I also want to make sure they know what happened, right? And so I think with fear, when we're afraid of something in life, I went through a divorce and I was very scared to get divorced. But in the moment when I was putting it off for years, I don't think I could have told you I'm scared. I just knew I wasn't ready. I think wasn't ready. People having kids, I'm not ready, right? There's this whole concept of I don't feel ready. That's fear. So when I'm on a bike, I'm like, oh, obviously I'm scared of that. And now I can work through it. And I think what that helps us do is it helps us understand fear that manifests in different ways. I may not be physically scared of smashing my face, but I'm scared to get divorced because I don't wanna lose everything, or I don't wanna be unlovable, or whatever the fear around being afraid to get divorced or being afraid to quit a job that's not fulfilling. I think being able to really identify what you're scared of and now what needs to happen so that doesn't happen. Mountain biking taught me that, to really, like, navigate through fear and to also understand when the fear, the risk versus the reward doesn't equal out. I say that about any wooden skinny off the ground. I do not need to ride a wooden skinny off the ground. I risk versus reward is not worth it to me. I'm so terrified the whole time. It's not fun. So I'm cool not riding skinnies, right? And I think that's another beautiful thing about mountain biking is you choose what you want out of this sport. It doesn't have to be gnarly. You don't have to be scared shitless on every ride. but maybe riding over a rock that you used to avoid, that's enough. That's enough to be like, I was scared of that rock and then I rode over it and it wasn't so bad. That's what we're trying to get to. We're not trying to get to the point where you're pooping your pants on every ride. Nobody wants that.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point there too, because as I was thinking, as you were talking, what I was thinking about was a lot of times when I'm riding myself or with my friends or talking to people, it's like they have this idea of like they want to know how bad it could possibly go, and then knowing like what's the worst it could possibly be. And I think that really applies to life, where it's risk management. You're just on a day to day, you're like, how bad could it possibly be? Like, how big could I possibly fail? And then trying to like reconnect that back to, okay, now do I really want to do this because of that?
Well, and I also think that we're putting ourselves at risk when we do any kind of a sport that takes us outside into the rocks and the dirt and the trees because, yeah, you could have a tiny little slip on a wet leaf and really mess yourself up, and you can go tomahawking down the side of a mountain and be totally fine. That's kind of the nature of our sport is you just never know how big or little a crash is gonna affect you. So, personally, I would think more people would wanna get really good at understanding balance points because I'm not gonna lie, how many times have you nearly crashed and you saved yourself and you're like, "Holy shit, if I didn't have skills
Yeah.
and know how to rebalance myself in that situation, most people would have slammed on their brakes out of fear, and that is usually what causes a crash, panic braking.
Yeah.
But when you get good and you practice enough and you have this acute awareness of balance points in different situations, you can get completely knocked off balance and cattywampus, look where you want to go, manage to let off the brakes and steer. That takes freaking skill, man. And I'm going to say on every single ride, just about, I'm saving myself from something. Part of the skills, right? You're like, it's not just staying safe, it's saving yourself when things go wrong. Just clipping my bar on a tree. I know how to save it.
I've definitely had the moments that they clip the bar on the tree and then like it's almost 2 seconds later and you go like, whoa, hold up. Or like you draw like you accidentally drop the hand where it's like it slips off and you're like, oh geez, like maybe you hit like your arm or your shoulder on the bars. But yeah, those little moments there. But then the skills coaching, like the things, the fundamentals, like all the stuff that you would teach or like that you want to learn, those things will keep you if you're well centered and then you clip a bar, like you're in the right position to get right back on it.
Well, and you know how to move quickly. The more you practice these skills, people kind of scoff at track stands. And I'm like, oh no, a track stand will save your life in many situations. If you get off balance up a steep climb with a ledge on it and you can track stand and rebalance yourself, that's a lot to learn at slow speed.
So this like what's really impressive to me too is like with Ladies AllRide and everything that you do. It's like you have the skill side, all of this coaching, you have the sort of emotional side and like everything that you bring to there as well. People are so engaged. But how do you scale this sort of thing?
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I've been flying by the seat of our pants for 15 years. I mean, honestly, when I first started all this, it was back in the early 2000s is when I got into the bike industry and it wasn't there weren't a lot of women involved. And what I realized was that I would go to all these World Cup races and I would meet partners of racing men and I would ask these mostly women partners why they didn't ride. And the answer seemed to be very consistently, "Oh, I went on a ride with my partner once and I crashed, and that was it. I don't need this sport. The dangers are too high. It's too scary. I'm not good enough." Just this theme of like, basically, I'm not learning the right way. And I realized that all the marketing around mountain biking in those days was very centered around Red Bull Rampage becoming a new, the free ride scene was just blowing up in the late 90s, early 2000s. And I remember putting myself in the position of a consumer looking at a magazine with the cover shot of a dude jumping a cliff gap, like a canyon gap, thinking, women aren't gonna look at this and think, I wanna do this, and, yeah, I want my kids to do this. That's and let's be honest here, a lot of the women in families are the main decision makers and the money spenders. And so I would sit in all these sponsorship meetings and I would hear all this money's going to Red Bull Rampage and the production of this and that. And I'd be like, well, what are you doing for women? And so really my whole mission behind starting Ladies AllRide, it means we should all ride because of the joy and the things it brings into our life, the positivity it brings into our life, but also because it's scary. So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but what I really wanted was to be a voice. I wanted a program that was a voice for the emotional side of mountain biking. I want women to hear that we do this because it's scary and challenging and hard, and we're never going to perfect it. And as women, I think I'm generalizing here, but I do think a lot of women are stuck in a perfectionist lifestyle, thinking they need to do it all, raise the kids, have a job, take care of ourselves, have a sport in our life. Like there's a long list of things that I think women feel responsible for. And they get caught up in this, like, I'm never going to be perfect, like reaching for this goal that's unattainable. And with mountain biking, I really wanted women to see that that is why you should do a sport like mountain biking because it forces you to let go of perfection and allows you to just be present in trying something and practicing something that you're literally never going to perfect. There's always going to be a challenge, whether it's a climb that makes your legs burn or you feel like you can't catch your breath, or it's a gnarly technical section. Whatever the case may be, you can always find a way to challenge yourself on a mountain bike and realize what you're capable of because of that challenge. And so we've just tried to be this like safe space globally where women can come and connect with themselves first and foremost on a deeper level, really see what you're capable of. It is a vulnerable thing to put yourself into a mountain bike skills arena, especially with a bunch of people you don't know, but it's also very empowering. And so we really wanted to be a space where women hopefully know that they're in a safe space to fully show up as themselves. We address women's needs, which we have hormones that are changing all the time. I don't know that a lot of male coaches would be able to identify, hey, you might be shaky today and not willing to try this line that maybe you've ridden before because of where your hormones are in your cycle. Like, we address this stuff because it's a real physical manifestation in our bodies that create more protection around ourselves when we're in certain phases of our cycle. So, really, the way I've tried to measure all this is how can we be a voice for the greater collective of women, women identifying people, non binary folks who are dealing with emotional issues. I actually just said this to someone the other day who lost their husband 5 years ago. And I asked her how she's doing and said, do you have a passion? You have something that you do that brings you joy each day? And she said, no, I don't. And I was like, what about mountain biking? And I said, this is what we do. We help women work through their trauma by showing them that you can have this whole life around something like exercise, but it's so much more than that. So I think, to answer the question in a roundabout way, I'm trying to give women this image that mountain biking isn't just a way to get fit. It isn't just a sport. It is an entire lifestyle that I don't do anything else with my friends but ride bikes together. We set aside the time. We're riding today at 4 o'clock. We're going to ride for 2 hours. We're going to chat on the trail, maybe have a little après at the car afterwards. But I'm saving so much money not going out for wine and cocktails and dinners. We're going riding together and we're getting all our shit out and we're talking about all the things. We've created a community around riding together. And I want that for more women, these women who've lost a husband or going through tragedy in their life that don't have this outside thing that brings them around other like-minded people, that gets them outside moving their bodies. People that don't have that, they need that. And I want them to know they need that.
It's such a fantastic thing to sort of hear that entire message kind of wrapped up in a whatever, couple minutes of talking about it. and to get a real sense of, what it would look like scaling and like working with your business to this kind of thing. And one other thing that I even heard in there was like, you're talking about like the differences between how you would run a women's only mountain bike camp and and then a men's or like a just gender agnostic camp. It's by no means am I the expert on this. There's definitely a different communication style that comes with talking to women and talking to men, and then also like across like men to women and vice versa. And just to hear you talk about it clearly, you've really tried to enable that communication and make it your own.
Yeah, we try to just help anyone who walks into our space immediately feel like they're around a bunch of humble, real humans who have dealt with life's challenges and who have used mountain biking as a tool for growth and change and community and a better life for ourselves. We don't want anyone walking into our space thinking we're cocky or that we have egos or that we think we're such badass riders. I show a lot of failures online, and a lot of times I'll do something over and over again and just show different ways to mess it up. You wouldn't believe the amount of advice I get from guys on there. It's so funny. And I want to be like, I'm not actually asking for advice. I know what I did wrong. I'm a coach. Like, it's fine. But that one guy's like, just hop over there. Have you learned to hop on your bike? I'm like, "Yeah, it's a pretty steep climb at 12,000 feet elevation. I would love to be able to just bunny hop up that section, but it's really not in the cards for many people, I don't think." But I show those failures. I show me trying again and again because I want people to see the reality around mountain biking. It's pretty fun to not get a climb on a bike, I think, and to keep trying over and over. And even if I fail, there's so much beauty in the effort and someone filming you and cheering you on and helping you figure it out like a puzzle, like, that keeps it exciting to me, and I want people to see the reality around mountain biking, not just being rad on a bike, and that's why I put failures up because I want people to know that when they show up in our space, it is absolutely okay to fail. It is actually welcome because you're probably going to at some point. You're not going to pop that wheelie or you're not going to get the wheel lift up high enough to get on that rock. And that's fully okay. And I think we just need more of that in life. We need to be okay with trying things that are scary and hard and potentially failing. That's okay.
Absolutely. So the question on like kind of the state of the industry as a whole and like the events and stuff that um happen in the mountain bike world, and like with Red Bull Rampage, for example. What's your take right now just on like how big things are getting, like how much the industry is pushing, and like what these riders are doing these days?
I'm a bad person to ask about Rampage. It was starting about the same time I was wanting to do a women's program, so I had to kind of fight against where all the money was going, and I was always like, "What is Rampage? Is that even mountain biking?" They're just skittering down a hill and hitting huge gap jumps that have massive consequences, and now women wanna get involved. And it's funny because I did get a lot of people hitting me up like, "Did you see women are they're letting women into Rampage?" And I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." I mean, I think any way that you find pleasure on a mountain bike, anything that you can add to your life that adds challenge and excitement and adrenaline and a new community of humans, absolutely more power to you. And there is a whole community of men and women now who want to hit big jumps and do big tricks. And that is a form of expression and a beautiful thing. The communities they have formed around creating these events together, the women all rallying together to make their own little series of events that lead up to Rampage, where they can just compete with themselves and not have the men around, I think is great. I think inviting the women into all these big production jump things is great. I think it's all great. Um, yeah, sometimes I wish that they would put more money into educational programs. I feel like I'm very lucky. I've been in this industry for 20 something years. I've have some great relationships with sponsors like Live and SRAM who really see the value in these women's educational programs. I don't feel like I'm fighting for money anymore. We're really well taken care of. That makes me really happy to know that there still are brands out there that put education-based programs at the top of their list. But I also understand the draw in watching people do things that make you go, "Ooh, ah, wow, that's insane." But do I have a problem with how many friends I've seen, Paul Bass being one of them? Thank God he was able to walk again, but Adolf, I just see those things happen, and I know how much money they're probably not making. And it makes me kind of sad. Football players that get hit in the head all the time are making millions and millions of dollars and are paid well beyond when they end their football career. Mountain biking, I feel like we're putting these athletes are putting themselves in some real high risk situations for some real low dollars. And I
Yeah,
think that that alone is hard for.
and watching it, especially the last few years with Rampage and, I know watching it last year with, like, Adolph's crash and everything, it was you kinda I got a little bit to the point where I was like, "I wanna sit down on a Sunday and have a nice Sunday watching a mountain bike event." And then, that crash happened, and it's pretty tough when feel connected to the athletes, and then that happens to them. To add
Yeah.
to that entire thing, with the whole week leading up, there's people that are going out just on the features that they're building a feature that's the biggest feature anyone's ever hit, that sort of thing. They're always pushing that envelope a little bit. And then there's 3 or 4 basically injuries where people don't continue for the entire weekend. So in the whole week, you have like half a dozen athletes that, you know, ruin the next year or their careers. And it's kind of tough to watch. This is my take on it, and I think that it's I also fully am aligned and agree with they're taking a lot of risk for not a lot of payoff potentially. I mean, sure, they could have this huge clip of like imagine a double backflip off an 80-foot cliff. That would look pretty sick. That poster would be on everybody's wall. Who's still posters, but like at every bike shop. But like just knowing that the infrastructure or like the funding isn't necessarily there long term is another whole thing. And this is my kind of segue into I wanted to talk a little bit about like, there really isn't like programs set up for people in action sports to do an action sport for the career that an action sport is, into their, let's call it like early 30s and mid 30s for people who are really lucky, very competitively, or maybe a bit older than that, like Kyle Strait or whoever. It's like there are the exceptions, but then after that, it's like tons of injuries, and there's not really like a transition pathway, and it's a very select few people who end up in a situation where they can capitalize on their previous fame and turn it into something that's long term. Like yeah, like I just to talk a little bit more about. I'd love to hear your kind of take on what maybe not what's the perfect kind of situation for this, but what would you like to see, I think, for like the action sports world, for like the more long-term kind of investment?
I mean, again, I think that this is a sport that is can cater to families. It's a sport you can do with your family. It's a sport you can travel to go do. Like, we all know this. Like, my whole life revolves around going and exploring new trails and riding new places, and that's what keeps it fresh for me is constantly evolving my riding by riding new places. And I just think that by promoting and showing these extreme versions of a sport that ultimately is just catering to the regular person who wants to find a better way to get exercise, is looking for a community, or maybe was, in my case, an athlete in high school that was a high performing athlete, but I didn't really want to go that route in college. And so when I graduated from college, I was out of shape. I didn't know how to get my fitness back. Step aerobics in the gym were not really my thing. I wanted to punch people. I had a lot of pent up aggression that didn't look good in a mirror. I needed to find a sport in my life. And so I started racing cross country in the 90s truly as like a forced way to get me in shape. Like if I have a race on Saturday, I'm going to go to that 6 a.m. spin class 3 times this week, and I'm going to have this focus so that I can go out and race my bike. That's going to get my fitness back. And then that slowly evolved into I found all these people that I connect with. I wasn't quite sure where I fit in the world, and getting a job, getting your dream job at an advertising agency in downtown Portland seemed great in my 20s, but that didn't connect me with anybody who I felt like were my people. I would come in on a Monday after a bike race. Everyone's like, "Why are your knees bleeding?" And I'm like, "I crashed my bike. I'm so cool." And they just thought I was kind of like a spaz. But then I started meeting other mountain bikers and I was like, "Well, this is a whole lifestyle." People come to these races because they're looking for friendships. And so I still believe that we are speaking to the general public who needs to hear that this doesn't have to be an extreme sport. It is a sport that you can do with your family, that you can do with your friends. It is a sport that can better your life, that can give you a better sense of self. It can strengthen us. It teaches us perseverance. Again, back to that, we should do things that scare us. We should do hard things. That's who I think we're speaking to. And I know the bike industry has taken quite a hit. COVID was a huge boom, but look at the signs. Like the signs are there that because COVID was such a boom, the reason people bought bikes is because they were locked up in the house and realized they needed a way to get out. They needed a way to move their bodies that was fun. I'd say most people who are sedentary aren't going to be like, I think I'm going to start running. Like, way easier to get on a bike. So I think we're still trying the industry needs to continue to speak to the people in the offices that are working 8 to 5 and don't have time for the gym, who need this external what I love about mountain biking is it accomplishes so many things. Gets me out with my friends, gets me outside, gets me exercising, right? There's all these things that in the past they were separate. I'd go to spin class at 6 in the morning. I'd go have lunch with a friend during the workday. I'd go walk my dog with another friend, right? You're trying to fit in all these life things. Where actually mountain biking, that it accomplishes like 5 things in one. Friends, outside, health, exercise, and also, what a better way to exercise than to do something that's actually fun?
Exactly. Plug to the
So
world's
that's what I want.
plug to the world's perfect sport for
Yeah, I think it
for
is a perfect sport,
yeah.
just access to trails, but even so, I mean, I'm all for if you need to ride a road bike 'cause you don't have trails near you, still getting on a bike is such a freeing, beautiful thing, and I want the industry to just continue. I do think the industry is speaking to the regular person. I just think a lot of the marketing still stems around these events. And while I think racing is a beautiful thing, because racing is black and white, you either win or you don't. And I love that. There's no judging. There's no like, oh, that person's going to go for a double backflip because they want a better judgment. No, they're just going to go as fast as they can. And I think racing has its place and it's great. I also think racing is great because people like me who didn't know how to get in shape, it was like, well, now I set a goal. And I hear that a lot too, like my dad, well, I just need a goal. I need like, maybe I should do, cycle Oregon. Then I have a goal. And I'm like, okay, I see that you need an end result to get yourself fit. I always say I'm training for life because we want to be strong and fit just to be alive now and to keep my body healthy. But if you need a goal, enter a mountain bike race. It's a great scene.
So is the key there, like, in yourself, someone who's made this into a career, like you've had a very long time of being successful in the mountain biking industry. Like, what's the key to that? I think part of what I heard there is like, you know, um, setting a goal, like kind of like loving what you do, like, taking it not being extreme necessarily. But are there any other things that you would say, like, what's the key to longevity in this sport?
If you're on my side of the sport, trying to be a part of the mountain bike industry as a job, I think it's really hard. I get a lot of questions from women who wanna start their own coaching companies, and I'd say 90% of the coaching companies out there, a lot of them started through us, either taking a class as a student, then realizing, "Wow, this would be really cool to teach people," and getting certified to teach. Um, I do think it's hard to it's not like skiing where you get a job with a resort and you're a ski instructor now and you get paid a salary, and most people who are getting into skiing think to take a lesson. I think we're still at this infancy of people realizing that a lesson is a good idea. And so I think I got really lucky and that I started all of this before lessons were very common. I was kind of right at the beginning of it taking off. I mean, I didn't even know about being certified until one of my who's now one of my top coaches was like, "There's a certification course in Whistler, we should go take it." I didn't know anything about it. And once I did that, that it changed my life. It made me a better rider, just like learning how to articulate what I was doing. So I do think that the education route's the way to go. I look at all these free ride girls. I just had a talk with Paul and Katie Holden, who was when Katie and I were coaching together, she was trying to do Rampage. She would go out there to Virgin every year and she would ride lines. She ended up getting hurt quite a lot. And I do remember saying to her, like, how much more are you going to try? Like, before your ankles don't work. And I hope that some of these younger girls, because one of the conversations was like, how do we get into this next high level of coaching? Like the younger generation is now seeing online what is possible. And we are getting women who are coming to us saying things like, I would love to learn a tail whip. And I'm like, do you actually know what a tail whip is? I think you're talking about just, a little whip, not a full tail whip where the bike goes underneath you. I think we need to get our terminology right here. But my point is they're seeing what's possible. So I would love for this generation of woman who is learning to jump at a young age, who's understanding the fundamentals of jumping and moving in the air differently than a 51-year-old who's totally good dead sailoring to the backside of all my tables. As long as I throw a little tilt in there, I feel great, but I am not gonna be teaching people how to whip on crabapple hits. So I would love for all these very skilled riders who have taken riding to this other level to learn how to coach so that, for instance, there was a jump jam that happened here in Bend, Oregon, where some younger girls moved to town and they wanted to get into jumping. So they started just like arranging this, like, let's go jump at this place called the Lair. And one of my coaches was there one day and watched 3 girls break their collarbones. And she's like, "Man, all these girls are so pumped to jump. They're organizing this jump jam, but nobody's there coaching them." So they're just kinda watching each other, and a lot of times when you don't know how to coach, you're gonna say things like, "Just go faster. Just pull up." So they're doing, like, weird stuff and they're getting hurt. And so I'm seeing that, yes, this younger generation is like, "Let's hook it," before they have skills. So I wanna keep reining it back in to if you have the talent to hit these jumps and you're doing tricks in the air, go volunteer your time to coach some of these other women. Go become a certified coach so that you can be the voice for this next generation of rider that wants to do the big tricks that us old ladies are not gonna be coaching.
Give any advice to other women to become coaches, and like you have a ton of experience, and like you said, you've been quite successful doing it. And obviously, there's a component of building the skills and like having the certifications and what all those sorts of things. But on the other end of it, you kind of have to build this personal brand, and there's so much emphasis on personal brands these days. And then, well, what's interesting is, reading about your sort of background, it's like you were maybe one of the OG personal brand builders. And so I'd love to hear like kind of your experience. Like, let's go back to the 2000s and like when you're building like a bit of a personal brand then, and then the personal brand now. Like, is there anything that sticks out that's the same?
Again, I get asked this a lot, like, "How did you get sponsored? How did you create a program that gets to travel all over the world?" Luck was part of it. I married a professional downhill racer, Red Bull Rampage guy in the early 2000s and ended up managing his career. And to be honest with you, he came up with the name AllRide. And in his mind, it was in those days when we were with Santa Cruz at the time. He was one of the ones who created the Santa Cruz Syndicate, and they were just coming out with the long travel. The Blur LT was just coming out. And now my ex was like, I ride it all. I race slalom on a small bike. I race downhill on a downhill bike. Now enduro is becoming a thing. And so in his mind, he was like, I ride it all. I ride all the bikes. I'm an all ride guy. And in my mind, I was like, "Oh, this is about we should all ride together." So back in the early 2000s when racing was a big deal, my ex-husband had a vision. He came from a bad background and he made it as a mountain bike racer out of pure passion. So he wanted to be a voice to the younger generation about it doesn't matter how you grew up or how dysfunctional the adults were around you. If you have a dream, you can realize it. And so we turned him from a racer into an ambassador kind of before that was even a thing. And like we got our first Sprinter van in 2005. That was before the Sprinter boom because we had this vision of going to these mountain bike races where the racers were treated as kind of rock stars. They're sitting behind a pit wall, maybe signing autographs during like an organized signing session. But other than that, they're not really interacting with the public. And I remember thinking, these racers aren't selling bikes. Like most people who want to get on that Santa Cruz bike that they're riding is because they want to be like them, but they want it for free. They wanna get sponsored. They wanna be on that team, right? So, we both started realizing what is a way we can actually get in front of consumers and get their loyalty? Well, being a racer was a great way for him to develop a persona from racing that translated into, "Hey, we're coming by your shop in Pennsylvania. We're gonna do a group ride. Oh, you got a pro racer coming to do a regular group ride? Hell yeah, I'm there." 80 dudes would show up and I'd be the only woman and I'd get fully dropped because now they're all ego busting trying to see if this downhill racer can actually pedal. So they just smoke me. And I remember thinking like, what, why aren't women coming out to these rides? But my point is that we learned how to get in front of people better so that we were actually communicating with potential consumers. We had a fleet of Santa Cruz demo bikes. So we would stop at shops in between races, be like, come ride with this pro downhill racer, check out our fleet of demo bikes, check out all these Fox clothes we have. And so we kind of understood from an early stages in the bike industry for me personally, he'd been in it since the 90s, but he saw the pattern of needing to be more than a racer in order for this to have any kind of longevity. We need to be ambassadors that are actually helping people choose what products to purchase. And so when I started Ladies AllRide, I already knew women make decisions on where the money's going. You know how many times I've seen a woman roll up, "Oh, my husband wants to get me into mountain biking, so he gave me this 1987 Gary Fisher to try it out." While I see him rolling out with his $10,000 carbon bike, I'm like, "Girl, you need to go grab that bike and ride it in our camp, and then it's your turn to get a $10,000 bike." But I saw this pattern in the bike industry of money going into races and racing, but the regular consumers who aren't going to those races, how are you convincing them to buy a bike? I mean, my current partner now, he couldn't name a pro mountain biker if you paid him to, but he loves mountain biking. He's gonna research the best bikes. He's gonna look at Pink Bike and all the comments, and he's not gonna buy what a racer is racing. And so I realized like we need to be speaking to the people who have no interest in the competition side of this sport, but who are actually in it for the lifestyle. And so we started a long time ago trying to create this more ambassador lifestyle where we are a trusted point person. And I'll admit, I had his name. It gave me a little clout in the industry at the time. I was super scared to change my name back to my maiden name after we had started this business together for 10 years. But I think what really helped me keep my head above water is I learned through all of those years of negotiating sponsorship deals and begging people to see the value in speaking directly to consumers that I've developed enough relationships in this industry that it's allowed us to get paychecks from these companies. And I don't think it's as easy these days to start a company like mine and get a paycheck from a brand. And that honestly is the only reason that we are able to do what we do at this point. I think the economy is in a weird space right now. People aren't spending extra money as much. We are struggling a little bit to get our camps to fill as quickly as they used to. Therefore, we rely heavily on sponsorship dollars and 2 decades of building relationships and proving we also have a proven return on investment, which is what I my first piece of advice to anyone that wants to get sponsored for anything is not how cool are you that they wanna sponsor you, it's what am I gonna do to help your brand get in front of people who I'm gonna be able to convince to purchase it, because that's the whole point of sponsorship is getting your product in front of people through an avenue that you might not naturally reach. And so a roundabout way to answer that question again is that I've had a ton of experience working with sponsors and seeing where the money goes and finding a way to actually prove a return on investment. And we do that through discount codes. We have a Ladies AllRide discount code to all of our sponsors. You buy a pair of, Crank Brothers pedals with our discount code, that's going to track that sale back to us. And so if they give us X amount of dollars in sponsorship dollars, but we sold twice that much in product when people came to our camps and we decided to make everyone buy flat pedals because they're clipping in and they're realizing it's inhibiting them, they're going to buy Crank Brothers pedals.
The
And that's going to be tracked directly back to us.
Yeah, and that's like, what's really cool to hear you talk about this entire thing is, and I hope you realize how unique this is like the having the 10,000-foot view down to the like microscopic view. Like the way you talked about that entire thing was going from like, I see where the money is flowing with the big brands and the very high level stuff, all the way down to the like, here's a discount code and this is how I take advantage of these types of things. And the other thing that I heard you talking about in this entire mix of, um, personal brand and like branding now, and I think this emphasis on personal brand these days, it's like everyone should have a personal brand. And I think all it's really saying is that you're just a unique mix of your own experiences up to this point, and like you should try to be as genuinely yourself if you're going to put something out there, right? And it sounds like you really, yeah, you really latched onto that at a time when a lot of people weren't, because it's like, even you said it here, it's like a lot of the women at these events were like the accessory to the the man who was riding in the event, right? So it's like you really latched onto that, and that's like very inspiring to hear. And I hope anyone who's listening to this is hears that message and like lean into it now. And it's, you there's more opportunities now, I think, than ever too, just like from my perspective, in the marketing world, it's like you lean into your own personal brand and there's going to be 50,000 people out there that hear your message and want to like see your thing, and they're going to, watch you on YouTube or whatever it is. And 50,000 people is a lot of people. It's like, think about that in a stadium or whatever. The other thing that I heard too that you were saying that's like so interesting to hear is really being able to dissect the layers of the industry. And so being like, yeah, there's these racing people and there's these people doing Rampage and whatever. But like also understanding that they're probably the biggest layer of mountain biking is that consumer buying bikes, just getting out for fun, having beers on the tailgate with their friends, that layer. And like you latched onto that very early in the 2000s, right? It's close to me too, close to my, start to mountain biking because I just thought it was the funnest thing in the entire world. First time I mountain biked Whistler, I was 11 years old, and I said, if I could do this for the rest of my life, I'd be a pretty happy guy. And 20 years later, I'm living in Squamish and I'm, out riding a mountain bike. So that's just a big long tangent. You answered that question beautifully, but that was a big long tangent to go around in a circle, as well of like just kind of acknowledging all of your points. And I just really hope that people lean into that, like, be yourself. It is like, generic advice. You hear it a lot, I think, but it's like be yourself and that creates the personal brand, right?
Yeah, and it's not easy, easier said than done,
Right.
especially as
Yeah.
I'm 51 years old. I do not want to be like selfie recording my entire life. And I have taken a few social media classes where they're like, show yourself, show the behind the scenes, show the struggle, show the reality of it all. Well, there are plenty of days where I'm like, oh damn, that those wrinkles are looking pretty deep right now. I don't necessarily want to be showing myself all the time, but I sure as heck don't mind showing myself riding. So I feel like I've chosen what works for me. I like showing myself riding. I've got a male partner who, begrudgingly will stop at every feature I ask him to stop and film me on. And that's great. I ride a lot of places I've never seen before. So I'm always trying new things. And I think that's my brand is showing the reality behind mountain biking. I have a staff that we're all very real. You can feel the energy right when you walk in, that we're self-deprecating, we're funny, we're down to earth, and that is who we are. And so when we are putting our brand, I've also had this question of my social media says Ladies AllRide and then Lindsey Richter and team. And I've really grappled with cutting my name out of it and just having it be Ladies AllRide. But way back when I started, I noticed there was one other coaching company, the Dirt Series, that's no longer around. And I remember looking at their social media and thinking, who am I watching here? Is that a coach? Is that a participant? Nobody was really personal on the account. And I realized this is such a vulnerable activity to get involved with. There should always be a human behind this type of brand where people know, hey, I'm vulnerable. I'm real. I've been divorced. I've been on reality TV and humiliated myself. I've gotten kicked out of my sorority. Like, I have a whole tale to tell right when I welcome people to the camp. I make a speech about things I've been through and how the bike was my savior because I want to immediately set that tone of we're all real here. And when you're doing a sport like mountain biking that is a little scary and vulnerable, it's very important that you are surrounding yourself by people who you do not feel like are going to judge you or criticize you if you're not good at it. I think that's a huge part of building a brand in this arena of teaching people to do hard things is that they immediately need to know they're safe with you and that they're comfortable around you. Sometimes I'm grabbing your butt to save you and it needs to be okay. I did, the woman who started the Dirt Series, her name is Candace Shadley. Um, she was kind of the first person who introduced me to the method to the madness of coaching, of like getting a huge number of women together and how to manage that, how to break them into small groups so that everybody feels they're getting ample attention. I would say that Candace was my role model. She was always when I decided to start my own coaching business after volunteering for hers, she never once made me feel bad about it. We agreed to stay out of each other's territories and that I would bring my camp to the East Coast and travel, where she was mostly like Canada and West Coast. And I really admired that grace that she gave me in being like giving me the thumbs up to start my own business. We were very different. Ours were very emotional. They're very much based around mental health and becoming a better human through the bike. And theirs was a bit more of a business model. I don't have any kind of business sense at all. I would do this for free if I could. because I love it so much. But yeah, I'd say she was a role model. And then Paul from, GSMBC was he changed my life. His style of coaching, his knowledge around it. I wanted to be as knowledgeable as him around coaching and riding. I just it blew my mind. So, and it's funny because I never really looked up at any of the, like, crazy pro racers, and I was around a lot of really rad people. I'd say Marla Streb is actually one of the reasons I started racing. She was, like, on the cover of Outside Magazine, like, strategically covering her body parts naked, and she was one of the early, like, downhill and cross country. All those old school girls, Missy Giove, I just found them like, "These are my people." They're rough around the edges, and Marla was like a molecular scientist at the same time that she was, like, racing on acid. Like, I just thought these women were so cool that they broke out of the mold of feminine women. I love that these tough, dirty I always thought of mountain biking like it's a dirty sport. We're always dirty. And I felt like, yeah, I wanna be like these women who do not care. They're just out there having so much fun. And that, again, like you said, that's what we're trying to do here. At the end of the day, mountain biking is so much fun, and the better you are at it, oh, the more fun it gets. And when you know what you're doing, then you know how to think, and then you control your thoughts into action, and the whole process is just, like, shows you what you can do, and I think we all need a little more of that in our lives.
Yeah, and I think that the rough around the edges outlaw style, I think that is like the right role model for the mountain bike industry. Like I love it. I think it's the best,
Yes.
especially with like Missy
We're
and
always
everything.
bleeding. We're always bleeding. I'll sit in the bath sometimes and I'm like, God, I don't trust anyone that doesn't have scars. Women show up at our camps with like little short socks and these smooth legs. And I'm like, oh girl, you need to get some roughage on those legs. It's like too smooth. I don't trust you. You gotta have big old scars. I love all my scars. They're awesome.
Exactly. It's like the battle wounds, the mar. You need more. Like you can't. You look too perfect out there. Not like you gotta like rough yourself up a little bit. Get some like
You gotta
some
always have a
scrapes.
scab somewhere. There's always a scab on a mountain biker's body, always. Whether it's just a little pinprick by your pedal or a stick that whipped you in the arm, we're always bleeding. It's great. And I always say this, the average human doesn't know how to fall down. We know how to fall down, okay?
Exactly, and then get back up too. Well,
And get back up.
and so with Ladies AllRide, and I kind of finish it on this one is like you have the camps, you also have like your smaller kind of like coaching stuff that you do. But what's kind of next for Ladies AllRide?
We're really leaning into the retreats. I think that they're becoming popular. They're easy to fill. Basically, I think once people have taken a few camps and they've really worked on the skills, whenever you come to a camp, you work on skills that you're gonna wanna work on forever. And so I think once people come to a couple camps and they realize that they've elevated their skills to another level, they're looking to go ride somewhere really cool and maybe challenging with a group of people they can trust that isn't just gonna smoke them. For instance, we're going to Finale Ligure this year. It sold out in a day, and I think it's because you hear about Finale and you're like, "Oh, you can't be a beginner," it's intense, and if you look into the packages of riding there, you would most likely have to hire a guide. If you don't want anyone else to be on your tour, you'd have to hire a private guide. Otherwise, you're gonna be put in a van with various people who you might not know where they're at in their riding, and I think there's a little fear of, like, I'm a woman, I've never gone to Finale. Do I really wanna be thrown into a shuttle with a bunch of dudes? I might slow them down. Those are the things we hear a lot about people's insecurity behind mountain biking. I don't wanna hold anyone up or slow anyone down or make them wait for me. So if you come on a retreat with us and you know about us, you know that no one gets left behind. There's always a tail guide in the back and we're skills coaches. So if we get to a section of trail in the middle of Italy that's intimidating, we're going to coach you down it. We're not just going to mob through and hope for the best for you. And so we're really kind of leaning into these more intimate experiences. And I do believe a lot of women are hearing about us word of mouth, and they're hearing things like, it will change your life. It will help you see yourself differently. And they're wanting a little more quality time with us. I mean, we're really well versed in life's adversities and how mountain biking can truly be a catalyst for growth and change and peace. And traveling to these countries, maybe, a lot of these women will say to us, I've never traveled by myself. I've raised 2 kids. It was always me going with my family. This is an opportunity for me to fly to Switzerland alone, meet up with a group of women I trust who I know are gonna help me through, and have this magical experience on bikes in a foreign land. So we're really leaning into these more like intimate 7-day experiences where we really get to know these women, and it's crazy the messages we get after some of these retreats of how people just feel like they're part of something, they have something to look forward to, or they're gonna build that in their own community, like, "More women need to know about this sport, I'm gonna help them figure it out." And that is the biggest gift I think we can give to people is connecting with them in a way that we inspire them to do the same in their own community.
That's awesome. And you're making me a little bit jealous here that there's not like a men's retreats, the all ride men's retreat sort of thing. It sounds
Where we're
like
journaling.
yeah. I'd
I mean, we're always
love
trying
that.
to
I'd
mix
love
it
to
up.
disconnect for a couple, like a whole week or something like that.
Awesome, and one of my favorite things is when the ladies who do have male partners, they'll come back on day 2 of one of our, like, 2-day camps, and they're like, "Oh my god, I was telling my husband about, wipe your butt on the berm, and he went on a ride that night and was like, 'Oh my god, it totally works.'" And I feel like that's our way of getting into men's ears where they're like, "Tell me more. I've never heard this stuff." Even my own boyfriend, I'm like, he was a great mountain biker, but I noticed his cornering started to improve. I'm like, "You've been listening to some of the lessons, haven't you?" He's like, "I mean, I just never really thought about leaning my bike that far." You're like, "Yeah, totally."
So that's awesome. Okay, well, and I think that's kind of all the time we have here, Lindsay. But it was awesome chatting with you. Thanks for coming on the podcast. Like, truly,
Yeah,
so much
thanks for having
insight.
me.
Um, you make it sound like, well, I mean, you definitely prove that like instruction and coaching is more important than ever. And it probably will always be. And also that human connection, that piece. Like people are always going to be connecting. They're always going to want to have the people to go to when they're looking to learn something. So really appreciate
Yeah.
all. Yeah,
I think the coaching world is a great place for people to start. When I first started mountain bike racing, I really was trying to find more people to ride with. And the only way to do that was to go to a race. And I'm hoping that more people are learning that you can go to a skills lesson and there's no competition. We're all on the same page, learning together, which bonds people in a different way. So we're just trying to create a space where people can enter into this sport and know they have a whole community with open arms ready to welcome them in.
amazing. Okay, well, this is awesome.